Oh, I've dated much worse guys than him. Much worse. I mean, at least he's famous.
I started by using the Match custom search filter. I filtered out joy, happiness, toilet paper, and reason.
Boom.
Most years I've dated are a little, I don't know, straightforward. I mean, there's a little misery, but nothing truly soul-crushing about them.
I just want to be remembered, you know? Do you know the poem, The Road Less Traveled by Shakespeare? I actually have the tattoo of it.
Don't ask me where.
You devil.
Guilty. She gets me. That's the best part. When you meet someone that takes time to see beneath the surface.
Of the earth. It's just a perfect match.
Just a little follow-up to our Match.com date with 2020. Call me 2020. Make 2021 a great year. We are not there yet, so I need you guys to stay focused. These next 10 days, we got a lot of work to do, starting today. So we're going to jump right into it today with, again, a little video from Jill Pavich about the Cambridge course with expository writing, which, again, you're probably saying, Delaney, you've been saying argumentative. We're doing argumentative. Well, you're going to see from this, all right? Argumentative and expository writing, they do still shake hands, all right? And so our expository writing can blend into argumentative writing. I want you to keep that in mind. There's a reason why I'm bringing this up today is because we're going to jump into a Common Lit assignment where you're going to have a discussion question. Maybe some expository writing will come into that. So, as I said, super quick today. Let's go ahead and jump into the lesson with Jill Pavich and then something special.
We're going to talk about the role of expository writing in EGP instruction. In a previous video, when we were talking about the changes to the assessments themselves, I had mentioned that for paper 1, the mark scheme now clarifies that students are expected to develop an argument as their paper 1 response. Keyword, argument. If we double back to the 8004 syllabus, the word argument didn't appear on the mark scheme back then. And as I had mentioned, plenty of questions on past paper 1 exams, they did invite argument, but plenty of questions encouraged explanations as well. Essay prompt questions such as the one about account for the increasing popularity of digital photography, something like that invites our writers to explain why the popularity is going up, not whether or not it is. And even though exams from roughly 2012 on began featuring the statement at the top that says, use examples to support your arguments, it's really helpful that the rubric now clarifies that that argument is the target goal. So it's safe to say that a full-blown expository essay will no longer be something our students will need to do when they sit for this exam for paper 1. So the question now becomes, do we quit teaching expository writing then? And my answer for that, guys? Of course not. First of all, if you're in my situation, my writers are still expected to write full-blown expository essays for their state standardized writing exams. For my fellow colleagues who teach older students who are preparing to go on to college, they're writing expositorily for different college admissions circumstances. And if you think about it, even inside of our own course, the paper 2 exam questions will definitely ask students to explain things in their own words to demonstrate understanding. If you look at some of the key command words, things like compare, contrast, demonstrate, explain, state, summarize, all of these terms can invite an explanation, and these terms may very well be used in papers 1 or 2. In paper 2, there are a lot of questions, in fact, that ask students to explain using their own words or to summarize something from a particular paragraph in the passage. And even with paper 1, it's not out of the question to see a word like explain as part of one of the essay questions. It's just that ultimately that word explain is going to be paired with a request for an argument as the rubric expects. So all of that is well and good. We definitely need to keep teaching expository writing as part of this course and for our students' benefit in general. However, the larger point I want to make with this video is that expository writing skills are not independent from the argument our students are expected to write in their paper 1 essays. Previously, and even as part of Common Core, we tend to separate these two forms. Expository writing is its own thing, argumentative writing is its own other thing. But the pivot I'm hoping to see, and the pivot I'm making as a teacher myself who's evolving over time, is that we don't need to teach writing forms so separately all the time. Sure, our students need to delineate between them, but they also need to know how to use them in conjunction to effectively communicate. So for instance, when our students go to write their paper 1 essay, they're going to need to provide us with some input regarding the topic they chose. They're going to need to explain some of the information they're offering as support or evidence. And once they've shared out or explained that input, then they're going to need to argue its relevance or give us the output. Here's what I make of that information. So notice that in truth, our writers are blending the various forms of writing in order to get their argument across. In one text that I came across, they call this teeing up the point. It's kind of like golf. So in sharing their input on the matter, that's basically their ideas, their examples, their evidence. That's like putting the golf ball on the tee. The writer is going to use that information as leverage to drive the main point home, which is where they connect the input back to their position on the matter. So again, expository writing skills are hard at work inside the larger system that is the argument. So it's really important we help our students see how these building blocks work together and contribute to the larger learning goal.
All right, as I said, we are going to do a Common Lit assignment, and it's something special. And so we're going to watch a speech. May not sound great, but it is. It's Elie Wiesel. And this is the speech. We did see a sneak peek of it before when we saw the Elie Wiesel biography documentary, the brief clip. And so this is the entire speech, and there's a few reasons why we're going to do this. I was just going to put the YouTube link on there and let you go ahead and watch it on your own, but I think it's important for us to watch it together. We'll let it play, all right, and then I will show you the Common Lit assignment, which is this speech, all right? But let's go ahead and listen to the words of Elie Wiesel.
Mr. President, Mrs. Clinton, members of Congress, Ambassador Holbrooke, Excellencies, friends. 54 years ago, to the day, a young Jewish boy from a small town in the Carpathian Mountains woke up not far from Goethe's beloved Weimar, in a place of eternal infamy called Buchenwald. He was finally free, but there was no joy in his heart. He thought there never would be again. Liberated a day earlier by American soldiers, he remembers their rage at what they saw. And even if he lives to be a very old man, he will always be grateful to them for that rage and also for their compassion. Though he did not understand their language, their eyes told him what he needed to know. That they too would remember and bear witness. And now, I stand before you, Mr. President, Commander-in-Chief of the army that freed me and tens of thousands of others, and I am filled with a profound and abiding gratitude to the American people. Gratitude is a word that I cherish. Gratitude is what defines the humanity of the human being. And I'm grateful to you, Hillary or Mrs. Clinton, for what you said and for what you are doing for children in the world, for the homeless, for the victims of injustice, the victims of destiny and society. And I thank all of you for being here. We are on the threshold of a new century, a new millennium. What will the legacy of this vanishing century be? How will it be remembered in the new millennium? Surely it will be judged, and judged severely, in both moral and metaphysical terms. Its failures have cast a dark shadow over humanity. 2 world wars, countless civil wars, a senseless chain of assassinations, Gandhi, the Kennedys, Martin Luther King, Sadat, Rabin, bloodbaths in Cambodia and Algeria, India and Pakistan, Ireland and Rwanda, Eritrea and Ethiopia, Sarajevo and Kosovo, the inhumanity in the Gulag and the tragedy of Hiroshima, and on a different level, of course, Auschwitz and Treblinka. So much violence, so much indifference. What is indifference? Etymologically, the word means no difference. A strange and unnatural state in which the lines blur between light and darkness, dusk and dawn, crime and punishment, cruelty and compassion, good and evil. What are its causes and inescapable consequences? Is it a philosophy? Is there a philosophy of indifference conceivable? Can one possibly view indifference as a virtue? Is it necessary at times to practice it simply to keep one's sanity, live normally, enjoy a fine meal and a glass of wine, as the world around us experiences harrowing upheavals? Of course, indifference can be tempting. More than that, seductive. It is so much easier to look away from victims. It is so much easier to avoid such rude interruptions to our work, our dreams, our hopes. It is, after all, awkward, troublesome to be involved in another person's pain and despair. Yet for the person who is indifferent, his or her neighbor are of no consequence, and therefore their lives are meaningless. Their hidden or even visible anguish is of no interest. Indifference reduces the other to an abstraction. Over there, behind the black gates of Auschwitz, the most tragic of all prisoners were the Muselmänner, as they were called. Wrapped in their torn blankets, they would sit or lie on the ground, staring vacantly into space, unaware of who or where they were, strangers to their surroundings. They no longer felt pain, hunger, thirst. They feared nothing. They felt nothing. They were dead and did not know it. Rooted in our tradition, some of us felt that to be abandoned by humanity then was not the ultimate. We felt that to be abandoned by God was worse than to be punished by Him. Better an unjust God than an indifferent one. For us to be ignored by God was a harsher punishment than to be a victim of His anger. Man can live far from God, not outside God. God is wherever we are, even in suffering, even in suffering. In a way, to be indifferent to that suffering is what makes the human being inhuman. Indifference, after all, is more dangerous than anger and hatred. Anger can at times be creative. One writes a great poem, a great symphony. One does something special for the sake of humanity because one is angry at the injustice that one witnesses. But indifference is never creative. Even hatred at times may elicit a response. You fight it. You denounce it. You disarm it. Indifference elicits no response. Indifference is not a response. Indifference is not a beginning. It is an end. And therefore, indifference is always the friend of the enemy, for it benefits the aggressor, never his victim whose pain is magnified when he or she feels forgotten. The political prisoner in his cell, the hungry children, the homeless refugees, not to respond to their plight, not to relieve their solitude by offering them a spark of hope, is to exile them from human memory. And in denying their humanity, we betray our own. Indifference, then, is not only a sin, it is a punishment. And this is one of the most important lessons of these outgoing centuries' wide-ranging experiments in good and evil. In the place where I come from, society was composed of three simple categories: the killers, the victims, and the bystanders. During the darkest of times, inside the ghettos and death camps, and I'm glad that Mrs. Clinton mentioned that we are now commemorating that event, that period, that we are now in the days of remembrance. But then we felt abandoned, forgotten. All of us did. And our only miserable consolation was that we believed that Auschwitz and Treblinka were closely guarded secrets, that the leaders of the free world did not know what was going on behind those black gates and barbed wire, that they had no knowledge of the war against the Jews that Hitler's armies and their accomplices waged as part of their war against the Allies. If they knew, we thought, surely those leaders would have moved heaven and earth to intervene. They would have spoken out with greater outrage and conviction. They would have bombed the railways leading to Birkenau, just the railways, just once. And now we knew, we learned, we discovered that the Pentagon knew, the State Department knew, and the illustrious occupant of the White House then, who was a great leader, and I say it with some anguish and pain because today is exactly 54 years marking his death. Franklin Delano Roosevelt died on April the 12th, 1945. So he is very much present to me and to us. No doubt he was a great leader. He mobilized the American people and the world, going into battle, bringing hundreds and thousands of valiant and brave soldiers in America to fight fascism, to fight dictatorship, to fight Hitler. And so many of the young people fell in battle. And nevertheless, his image in Jewish history, I must say it, his image in Jewish history is flawed. The depressing tale of the St. Louis is a case in point. 60 years ago, its human cargo, nearly 1,000 Jews, was turned back to Nazi Germany. And that happened after the Kristallnacht, after the first state-sponsored pogrom with hundreds of Jewish shops destroyed, synagogues burned, thousands of people put in concentration camps. And that ship, which was already in the shores of the United States, was sent back. I don't understand. Roosevelt was a good man with a heart. He understood those who needed help. Why didn't he allow these refugees to disembark? 1,000 people in America, the great country, the greatest democracy, the most generous of all new nations in modern history. What happened? I don't understand. Why the indifference on the highest level to the suffering of the victims? But then there were human beings who were sensitive to our tragedy. Those non-Jews, those Christians that we call the righteous Gentiles, whose selfless acts of heroism saved the honor of their faith. Why were they so few? Why was there a greater effort to save SS murderers after the war than to save their victims during the war? Why did some of America's largest corporations continue to do business with Hitler's Germany until 1942? It has been suggested, and it was documented, that the Wehrmacht could not have conducted its invasion of France without oil obtained from American sources. How is one to explain their indifference? And yet, my friends, good things have also happened in this traumatic century. The defeat of Nazism, the collapse of communism, the rebirth of Israel on its ancestral soil, the demise of apartheid, Israel's peace treaty with Egypt, the peace accord in Ireland. And let us remember the meeting filled with drama and emotion between Rabin and Arafat that you, Mr. President, convened in this very place. I was here, and I will never forget it. And then, of course, the joint decision of the United States and NATO to intervene in Kosovo and save those victims those refugees, those who were uprooted by a man whom I believe that because of his crimes should be charged with crimes against humanity. But this time the world was not silent. This time we do respond. This time we intervene. Does it mean that we have learned from the past? Does it mean that society has changed? Has the human being become less indifferent and more human? Have we really learned from our experiences? Are we less insensitive to the plight of victims of ethnic cleansing and other forms of injustices in places near and far? Is today's justified intervention in Kosovo, led by you, Mr. President, a lasting warning that never again will the deportation, the terrorization of children and their parents be allowed anywhere in the world? Will it discourage other dictators in other lands to do the same? What about the children? Oh, we see them on television, we read about them in the papers. And we do so with a broken heart. Their fate is always the most tragic, inevitably. When adults wage war, children perish. We see their faces, their eyes. Do we hear their pleas? Do we feel their pain, their agony? Every minute, one of them dies of disease, violence, famine. Some of them, so many of them, could be saved. And so, once again, I think of the young Jewish boy from the Carpathian Mountains. He has accompanied the old man I have become throughout these years of quest and struggle. And together we walk towards the new millennium, carried by profound fear and extraordinary hope.
We're going to jump into the Common Lit assignment, which is, all right, the perils of indifference. This is super important, and this is also going to be part of an argumentative essay that you're going to learn a little bit more about tomorrow, but you need to get this one under your belt first, all right? So let's go ahead and jump into Common Lit. All right, here we go. No big shocker here. The Elie Wiesel Perils of Indifferent Speech. Well, you just heard it, but here it is. And so you're going to have some guiding questions along the way. And then, of course, your assessment questions. And then we will save this discussion question for our exit slip today. So you'll do the assessment questions right here on Common Lit, the discussion question for our exit slip. And then we will use this for a springboard into our argumentative essay tomorrow. All right, let's go live, and then I'll let you guys get on with your work, get on with your day. Camera's on, here we go.